Hey, and we're live after that beautiful elevator music. That was always putting me asleep. Welcome, everyone. We're joined today with Noam and Barry from Interchain Labs, which is the new, how would I call Interchain Labs? It's almost the new arm of the ICF, the Interchain Foundation, which used to be the foundation behind the Cosmos Hub. And now, we have Interchain Labs, which is really driving the Cosmos Hub forward. We're going to have a pretty cool space today. We're going to explore a little bit about the history of the Cosmos Hub, as well as a lot of the exciting changes coming to the ecosystem. It's been a whirlwind. I tell you, the last couple of months, I've just been seeing announcement, and a lot of bull posting on Twitter. So welcome, guys. Welcome, Noam and Barry. I think to kick off, I'd love to just get a brief introduction about from you guys. What is your role at the IC, at the ICL, and maybe just a brief background about yourselves. That would be really good to know.
Yeah. No, why don't you start? Your background is much more interesting than mine. So.
I don't know about that. Maybe. I don't know about that. So where do I start? I have been working in Cosmos for about 4 years. I started at the ICF, Interchain Foundation. I moved to Binary for a while, and now I'm at Interchain Labs. I've always sort of been in and around the Cosmos Hub in some way. I was DevRel lead first, and then business development for a while, and now product management. My background, though, is, so it's a long story. I've done several things. I was a musician for a while, and I still am in many ways, but I was touring the world. And somehow I ended up here. That's the short version.
Wow, that's very. There's a big dimension.
It's 180.
I'm a musician, and now I work on
Cosmos. Touring as a musician into leading product for the Cosmos Hub.
I've always had a fascination for the technology, and I've always sort of like, I've been coding since I was young, basically. But you can have many passions in life, I think.
Yeah. I actually don't know what brought you into Cosmos originally. No.
Honestly, I was just looking. I was trading for a while, and I didn't like that, and so I want to work in crypto, and I just looked for crypto jobs in Berlin, and honestly, that was it. And it turns out I knew somebody also worked at ICF, but I applied before I even knew that, so that was interesting. I don't know, random. Yeah,
that's cool. I'm Barry. I'm one of the co-founders of Skip, now Interchain Labs. I spend a lot of my time on product and engineering and ops, and trying to make sure that everybody building app chains with the Cosmos SDK, or building with the Cosmos Hub, get what they need and are able to grow, scale their businesses, scale their communities and their protocols, and win. I got into Cosmos 2 years ago now, in 2020. Yeah, I guess 3 years, Jesus. In 2022, right before Terra exploded. So Mag, my co-founder, and I were building the original prototype of Skip at a Terra hacker house in Chicago. It was this 4-week hacker house. And in the middle of week 3, the DPEG happened. And everyone from TFL disappeared, and 3/4 of the hackers disappeared. And I had already quit my job at that point, and I needed the money, and we needed to win. I was like, oh, okay, if this thing is going to collapse, we really need to win, because we don't really have a plan if we don't. And it gave us a good chance, I think, to actually think about, do we really believe, were we just here for Terra, right? Or do we really believe in the broader Cosmos vision? And, for Mag and I, and I think Noam and a lot of folks at the ICF and ICL, like really, we care super deeply about trying to build not just like a blockchain, but the foundation for the next iteration of the internet. And we look at Cosmos, and if you work backwards from that goal, like, we want to build the foundation of a new internet. What are the things that you need? It needs to be open source, right? Like through and through, the rails need to be fully open. It needs to be fully permissionless to build with. Like you shouldn't need to ask anyone's permission or buy any particular token. And it needs to be infinitely horizontally scalable, just like the internet is, right? You can't be constrained by like the scaling constraints of any one chain. And Cosmos is now the only ecosystem that like has those sort of fundamental pieces that you'd need. And so we, through many sort of pivots and trials and fun, exciting times building Skip, now find ourselves and Interchain Labs is responsible for the sort of the core development of the Cosmos ecosystem and the growth of the ecosystem. And like, we're super excited to do it because we've had that belief this whole time. And yeah, excited for the next chapter.
That's actually a pretty good preface, because I want to touch on like maybe a brief overview of the history of Cosmos, not from like a historical perspective, but maybe some of the challenges that the hub, the ecosystem has faced, the element that is Cosmos. Because I was the same coming from Terra over to like discovering the Cosmos, and it was almost like a roller coaster ride of like, yes, the app chain thesis is here, and then it changes, and then so we sort of had this like, I think after Terra, there was a point where we had this like really big high of like, it's Cosmos season, and then it sort of kind of came back down, and then we went through this like bear market, and then we went into, I think it was like around Celestia launch. There was all this renewed like enthusiasm for the Cosmos and everything, and then we sort of had this boom of users with Dimension and everything going on, and then it sort of like dropped off again. And so, but I'd love to like, really break this down, because there's been a lot of Cosmos has its own culture. There's the politics, there's the hub versus the wider ecosystem. So maybe break down an overview of what is Cosmos and the history of Cosmos and some of the challenges that maybe we've faced.
Yeah, totally. Noam, you've been around the ecosystem a bit longer than I have. Do you want to sort of sketch the landscape when you arrived and through your perspective, and I can give mine after.
Yeah, I would say maybe in terms of like its effect on the Cosmos hub and the ecosystem, there were maybe like three major points, three major reorganizations that the last one was quite recent. When I joined, Interchain GmbH, which was and still is a subsidiary of ICF, was created because there were some leadership issues at the original company that was nothing to do with the ICF. It was All in Bits / Tendermint / Ignite. There were some issues between the team and leadership, and it was very complicated. And so a bunch of folks wanted to leave. Interchain GmbH was created as sort of like a lifeboat for these folks, so that they could continue working on the Cosmos stack, basically. From there, that's sort of when I joined. That's when Cosmos Hub team was essentially formed from scratch, led by Billy Rennekamp. I'm not sure if some folks still remember him. He was great. And then, we tried to make that work also in collaboration with external teams, Informal Systems, and Confio, and a bunch of other folks that started contributing. Then at the end of 2022, we sort of started realizing that things weren't really moving as smoothly as we'd liked. Again, some organizational issues. There was an entire new reorganization. So, for example, the company that I went to was Binary Builders, who ended up, maintaining the Cosmos SDK. So a lot of people from Interchain essentially just split up into different companies. Things moved around a bit, which, made it a little bit difficult to make progress. But we made progress nonetheless. We did our best. And then, here we are in 2025 and 2024. I think Barry has a lot more to say about sort of like what went wrong from there on to where we are now and how we fixed it.
Yeah, zooming out a little bit, I think originally so the Cosmos white paper came out in 2017, 2018, like many years ago. And the idea was at the time a pretty weird one. Like, hey, we're going to have a ton of blockchains with a bunch of different security mechanisms, and they're going to be hyper optimized for specific purposes. And that is the only way that the industry is going to scale. And at that point, Ethereum transaction fees were pretty cheap. ETH was like, less than $1,000. Like, it kind of sounded crazy. And I think everybody sort of initially dismissed it as crazy. But the core fundamental idea there of actually building an ecosystem, working backwards from, okay, there's going to be many chains. We need to start with standardization around interop, and we need to start with like deep programmability, has turned out to be like spot on the correct thesis. Like, now it looks obvious. Everyone is trying to do some version of this. Like, you've got all these different roll up clusters, and you've got like, people trying to get, people to build on their DA layer, this DA layer. And like, there's very few folks who are still in the camp of, well, we're going to get all of those sort of world's programs on a single blockchain. But there's very few folks who saw it coming early enough to sort of bake it into the ethos and the technology of the ecosystem, actually start with interop instead of starting with security. Like, that is still like the sort of differentiating factor in my mind, is that the Cosmos is horizontal and everything else is quite vertical. Initially, the core team and the founders who wrote that white paper, they were really focused on shipping for the ecosystem and building. But as a result of some, personal things and people wanting different things, that org basically blew up. Right. And it blew up in 2021, maybe. I don't exactly know when. I wasn't around.
2020, yeah.
2020. So yeah, earlier than that, even like before we had shipped IBC, it was like we were shipping IBC and that org was blowing up. And for a long time, folks were trying to put the pieces back together, right? Like the Interchain Foundation, binary builders, informal, all these teams that Noah mentioned, they're all full of folks who cared deeply about the ecosystem, who many of whom had been, at that original team, who wanted to see the ecosystem scale and win. And basically what happened was the whole scope of the original thing, the hub, ecosystem growth and development, and each of the individual components of the stack got basically chopped up and handed out to these different orgs. And we thought it was going to work well because everybody was well-intentioned and they were the experts in the world. But it was really, really difficult because there was no one holding all of the concerns, right? There was no one providing the vision, no one thinking about how the different pieces fit together strategically. And meanwhile, it was becoming more and more true that this was correct, right? So more and more people were starting to compete with the Cosmos ecosystem, and the ecosystem itself was having a ton of success still. 100+ chains are built with the SDK today. $100 billion of assets have been issued. IBC is a top 5 bridge by dollar denominated volume and top 1 by number of messages. And those things remain true, but without anyone charting the path, sort of leading the commercial vision, thinking about, okay, how does Atom really fit into the whole growth of the ecosystem? So when the ecosystem grows, Atom can grow. And when Atom grows, the ecosystem grows. It made it really, really hard to compete with all of these other, much more focused efforts. And so the latest change in terms of kind of creating Interchain Labs is all built around solving that problem of saying, okay, we need the Cosmos hub to become a real hub and drive value into the ecosystem. We need Atom to benefit from the ecosystem scaling and to be able to drive that value back to our customers through our products and through the hub, and make sure that the folks building on the stack can win too. And we need kind of one development team to do that, so they can work together on all the different pieces and make sure they fit together, instead of having 10 different teams holding 10 different concerns. And a lot of, what Noam and I have been doing over the last 3 months has been all around that goal of unity and making the hub a hub and trying to bring focus to the ecosystem.
It's super interesting because I think we go back and we think about Cosmos in terms of there was this whole talk about like the hub being incredibly neutral, and there's a lot of like different opinions about what the hub should do. Should it have Cosmosm? Shouldn't? Proposals, white papers, all this sort of stuff. And in the meantime, we had sort of this app chain ecosystem that was under the umbrella of Cosmos, but had nothing to do with the hub, sort of developing over here that was wrapped as Cosmos. And then you had like dozens of like very high profile chains building on Cosmos SDK, and many actually not even mentioning they're using Cosmos. It like sort of became a trend to like utilize the tech, but not actually, even mention you're part of the ecosystem, because it was this confusing thing of like Cosmos from the outside. Many people didn't understand what that meant, what the interchain really was. It was just kind of like Cosmos is a chain, it's over here, Atom's the token, pumps it doesn't, but they didn't really understand how it worked. I think until Celestia, and when Celestia came along, people sort of started to understand a little bit more coming into the ecosystem how it worked. But there was always this disconnect between had Osmosis over here, Stargaze, all these different ecosystems, and the hub by itself. And everyone always sort of was mentioning we need value accrual, but no one could figure it out. So maybe from that transition, talk about what that transition into what the ICL is now. Like, we had the ICF, which was sort of I believe before, a bit more of a large startup bureaucratic kind of environment, right? I'd imagine. Noam, you've been there for a long time, so you'd understand sort of how that was run, into like obviously the acquisition of Skip, and that leading into obviously the ICL now in a complete change of direction. So maybe run me through that and how that happened, and then what that change has kind of been internally.
Yeah. You want to start now? Maybe compare old ICF to new ICF?
I can tell you this from an experience, and that's a good example of like how things were challenging, right? So a couple months ago, half a year ago or something, I was posting about, I had this idea for the hub. I said like, hey, we need to start, doing a product idea basically, and we need to start figuring out if we could. And I went to the ICF and I said like, hey, here's this idea that I've got, and it's like, I think it's great, and we got a lot of support from people. And essentially, the response has generally been like, with that ex leadership, basically, it was like, oh yeah, we're gonna look into it, but it moved very slowly, right? And yeah, that's just generally sort of been the case where you can also tell what happened, right? Like the Cosmos Hub, we had AA DAO come in basically, which was great. The community took initiative. It's awesome to see. Funding started at some point for the hub started going through the community pool. So everything started getting like decentralized, and it was kind of like according to this like crypto mission. It makes sense, but it was also actually just a very natural response to a maybe dysfunctioning system. And we also know now that that wasn't very effective. Like it took a very long time to make decisions. Like product decisions weren't really made with a sort of like shared vision at all. Things were just sort of trucking along. And so, that's when Barry and Mag stepped in basically. And I think they have a very good sense of like how things are different right now. I will tell you this before handing it over. Like I have learned more in the last 3 or 4 months that I've been working at ICL. I've learned more than I have in the 3 years prior, like just in that short time period, because there are just incredibly talented people surrounding me basically. And it's wonderful.
Talent attracts talent, right?
Yeah.
It's a magnet.
Yeah. I think like, the highest level difference really was going back to one of the things you mentioned, Simon. Like the old ICF was very focused on neutrality, right? Like so focused on neutrality that they actually a big motivation for this breakup of the org and like all these different companies was many people didn't want to focus on the Cosmos Hub as a part of the ecosystem and think about it not as a separate thing, but actually as a part of the stack and a part of the platform that can make it really appealing to build in the ecosystem. So this focus on sort of credible neutrality that you mentioned, well, not even like hub neutrality, like neutrality with respect to like all chains. That made it, I think, really hard to have a focus in any way, right? Like, it was like, okay, well, if you don't care about the Cosmos hub, what do you actually care about? Like, and they sort of said, well, like, you know, we want more people to be using the Cosmos SDK, but then it's all right, well, what kinds of people and why, and how is that going to help you build the decentralized web 10, 20, 30 years from now, right? Like, you need a business model fundamentally, like you really do. And that was totally missing. And that kind of thinking was totally missing. Like, actually, Noam was the only person sort of in 2024 who was around this structure, beating the drum, being like, I don't know exactly what we are going to do, but we need to do something. And like, at a high level, we should do things that drive value to the hub when the ecosystem grows and help the ecosystem grow. Like, at very super high level, like, this is what we need. This needs to be the fundamental basis of the business model for Atom. And like, in the old structure, that was not a popular opinion. And like, now it is, and everybody is incentivized accordingly, and everybody's really focused on that, and focused on doing that in a way that's not like, you know, zero sum with the ecosystem, but like is value generative. Like, we want to build in the way that, like, when the Cosmos hub wins, app chains win, right? And vice versa. So that, I think, is like the really single biggest shift. And to the credit of the old ICF leadership, like, who brought us in, they saw that this was important, right? Like, they had tried the other strategy. It didn't work. It like was getting worse really fast as other people were catching on to the app chain thesis. And they were like, okay, we have to do something super dramatic to try to make that change. And so they did.
So talk me through that dynamic, that drastic, because it was a big shift, right? Like, in 1 minute went from, you know, obviously a lot of people are like, oh, Atom, Cosmos Hub, you know, all this sort of stuff. And the next minute, this sort of acquisition of Skip happened.
Yeah.
And it just went 180 degrees, right? We went from, you know, this way going completely this way. Talk me through that. Like, how did that look, and what's that been like since then? You know, because I mean, we're going to go into like a couple of different elements and like product, like Eureka and things like that. But from like an organization, like, how has that looked and changed basically the fabric of Cosmos, or the hub at least, coming in, and how did that look? Like, the ICF had this organization, the ICF, and then, you know, you guys came in, and now you've got ICL, and it's different leadership. So how did that kind of come about?
Yeah. You know, when basically a lot of it was driven by the ICF realizing, okay, we have all these different teams, you know, working on different parts of the stack, but when we zoom out and we look into the distant future, there's not really a way for us to keep building in, you know, 5, 10, 15 years. And if we want to build the next generation of the web, like, we have to figure that out. And they realized, hey, you know, at the same time, Atom and the Cosmos Hub is a community that's really deeply aligned with that, right? With that like goal of building this massive horizontally scalable internet. And that's what the Cosmos Hub had been asking for, and the community had been asking for the whole time. And there was a lot of aversion, I think, to actually just doubling down. And so there was a lot of like, you know, difficult restructuring that had to happen, and things like that, in terms of making sure we had a great team with us, and making sure that we brought the things in-house that we needed to bring in-house. But we got a lot of, you know, from our investors, like from Skip's investors, and from a lot of people just around us and in the ecosystem, and like, there was a ton of hand-wringing and anxiety and stuff about whether the governance community would be accepting of this new posture of, instead of saying, okay, well, hub neutrality, we don't care about the hub. Like, no, we care a lot. We're going to ship a ton of products. We're going to try to drive value and liquidity into the ecosystem. The hub is going to be a huge part of that. And we're going to need to move really fast. We need to change a lot. And there are a lot of people who said, oh no, the Cosmos Hub community, they'll never accept that. They hate the ICF. They don't want the hub to do anything. You're going to fail. And basically what we've seen is like the total opposite. Like the community is just like, oh shit, like they want to make the hub a hub. Like that sounds incredible. How can we help? Right. And so it's actually been a really wonderful experience. And like the other day, the IBC Eureka governance proposal, which is about expanding IBC to Ethereum through the Cosmos Hub, just passed and had like 0.02% votes against it. Like, and we had a bunch of people telling us, oh, it'll never pass. And we're like, what are you talking about? And like that, I would say is like the first thing. And I think we're going to do a lot more there with the hub. We have a bunch more ideas and things that try to continue to turn into a platform. And so, yeah, I think it's been great. I think it's like when you have leadership, like people are like, fuck yeah. And when you don't have leadership, people blame the community. But like the community is just a reflection of like the energy that like, you put out and what you're building for them. So I don't know if that's your experience.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think in the absence of leadership, what happens is everybody tries to step up to fill this leadership gap, but it's where you end up with all the politics, and it's where you end up with sometimes actors that come in that are kind of extractive because there's lacking frameworks for things. And I think the community was just tired of having that leadership void where, even though like that decentralization government element is really important to the community, I think chains have shown that, Ethereum's struggling with this at the moment, right? Not lack of leadership, but lack of vision and direction in the Ethereum Foundation has caused like a lot of people to speak against that. And then you see ecosystems like Solana, and I think we talked about this before, Barry, like Solana has like a very strong foundation that's very involved in helping to kind of, I guess, hold the hand of the ecosystem in terms of developing it forward. And that has a really powerful effect in actually building out the ecosystem and building it as a thriving eco, because they're there working with builders, supporting, innovating, driving growth and BD and expansion. And I think that is a huge contributing factor to Solana's success as an ecosystem. And I think we've discussed this. So having that foundation that's well capitalized, that's able to drive growth, that's able to really promote itself almost, right, it is key to. And I think Cosmos, with the tech that Cosmos has and the ability to promote, is gonna go a long way, because these other ecosystems have had growth. The layer zeros and all these interop solutions have had giant marketing campaigns and giant ability to drive this growth, and they've gotten ahead on inferior tech solutions. So I think Cosmos is in a good place for that. But I want to actually go, like, as we move like sort of in the half of this, I want to dig into maybe some of the forward-looking pieces of the hub. Like talking about product and talking about things like Eureka and things like, the forward direction of the hub. So maybe walk me through sort of one of the first major changes I think that came up was a governance proposal to have permissionless, essentially permissionless deployment on the hub. So maybe walk me through that. Like, how has this changed the fabric of the Cosmos hub that was traditionally did not have the ability to deploy smart contracts, was mainly focused on having app chains with shared security, and now has kind of come out with permissionless deployment on it. So walk me through that and what prompted that, and how does that change the fabric of the Cosmos hub?
Yeah, well, first a small correction. So at this stage, we don't have by choice permissionless contracts. Like the recent proposal that you saw was a request to have the ICL be able to upload contracts specifically for Eureka. So we have basically we can upload some contracts specifically for Eureka. Now, that being said, we would very much want to have permissionless smart contracts. The reason why is the hub is in the business of serving app chains everywhere or blockchains anywhere and providing, let's call them IBC services or services that can be provided over IBC. Eureka is the first one, right? We give you a bridge to anywhere. There are other things that chains need as well, right? They might need oracles. They might need randomness. They might need a DEX. They might need all kinds of things that you need to get started. We're in the business of trying to make sure that you can launch a sovereign, highly configurable, and super powerful and performant chain in no time. And a lot of that work that prevents you from doing that sort of like cuts down on your time to market are things that we can solve. And we want to make sure that it's not just the ICL working on these solutions, but we want to create an ecosystem where people can be profitable, make businesses that like offer these services on top of the hub. And so a permissionless smart contract platform is required for this. And we are actually already talking to some teams that are interested in some of this as well. So this is something we would really like to push for. Obviously, the community has to vote yes on this, but that's something that, is what we're looking forward to. And Barry, maybe.
Yeah. No. I mean, I was just thinking so the like zoom out, like very high level, we're going to make the hub a hub, right? And IBC is going to be the connective tissue that makes that happen. We see the future of the hub as providing a home for a massive sort of multi-chain marketplace of service providers and protocols that want first-class connectivity and distribution and access to the users, liquidity, and protocols that make up the app chains of the Cosmos ecosystem now and beyond, right? Like as crypto continues to scale and more protocols become app chains, they're all going to have the same kinds of issues that we've seen chains having in Cosmos, right? Difficulty getting listings, difficulty getting custodians, like difficulty having to rebootstrap liquidity every single time they launch, having to sort of have partnerships with on-ramps and off-ramps, having to needing to like work with other teams to launch their PFP collections even, right? Like out of the gate and using that for distribution. There's all of these things that you need to be successful as a protocol if you really just want to focus on your protocol. And the Cosmos ecosystem now, and most other ecosystems too, don't have a great place to get those services. And the Cosmos Hub and a permissionless smart contract platform on top of it, and like the liquidity that we're starting to route through it with Eureka and IBC are all of the fundamental building blocks we need to have to make that multi-chain aggregator and marketplace a reality, right? And what we really want to do is start to get that flywheel going where great teams are building in the Cosmos ecosystem, and then great service providers that want to connect with them and work with them, build on the hub to get access and distribution and support for doing that. And we just build that marketplace, and that makes it easier for the next chains to come and build, and that makes it more attractive for the next group of service providers. And the hub can scale and grow that way. It's a sort of traditional classic aggregator, marketplace business model, but done in a super crypto native and super protocol native way that I think we can only do in Cosmos, right? Again, this is because our core primitive is interop and IBC, not security, which is much more limiting.
Makes sense. I think from being in Cosmos for a long time as well, and actually working pretty closely with a lot of teams, I think there was definitely a lot of struggles to like, teams would come in and build their own chain or their own app chain, and then they were like kind of by themselves, right? It's like you've got your own little isolated island over here. You're either part of like the cabal or connected to one of the cabals, but you have to figure out your own, where the VCs that are native to the ecosystem are going to raise funding. And so you've got to find those. And it was always very interesting to see of like these really good builders that are just sort of stuck because they want to have this ability to build what they want to build, and that's what they're using the SDK, and that's why they're building this app chain. But then they don't have access to the users or the liquidity, and so they have to figure out how to build their own product, in the early stages, and they're using the app chain to make it like the best product they can. But then they're also like trying to get liquidity and users and trying to juggle these plates, which is normal to a startup, but they don't have that much to tap into, which makes it very challenging. So I think you raise a good point about being able to like offer things to these protocols so they have the best chances of success. So if you summarize, like, I guess the thesis of the ecosystem, the thesis of the hub, at least the smart contract layer, would you say it's more like aiming to be more B2B, or kind of a wider flavor of that? Because sometimes you get like a chain that's like, hey, we're DeFi layer, or we're a gaming layer, or we're this. Like, how would you kind of like describe that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be B2B, but a lot of it is also going to have, you know, big consumer basis, right? Like, for example, when we think it's really important that there's a DEX on the hub, right? And that the hub can be a liquidity hub. Now, you know, that DEX is, and that matters because, you know, all of these different chains need a place where users who have USDC or who have Bitcoin or ETH or Sol can easily and with deep liquidity swap into their tokens, right? And the hub is a great spot for that because it's going to have native first class, super fast IBC infrastructure that connects it to all of these different sources of really deeply liquid assets. So that obviously should be on the hub, right? It's obvious. Now, how does that become B2B? Well, I think then you get into the realm of working backwards from how do we make it so that chains who are launching, Babylon, DYDX, Nillion, are excited for their liquidity to land there and want to incentivize their liquidity to be there instead of being somewhere else. And so the B2B nature is going to come, I think, really through the business model in that case. For example, why not have the hub DEX have some percentage of trading fees kick back to the chains and the communities that those assets are coming from, right? That kind of alignment is how the hub really becomes a hub, where we're working with all of these teams. It's not like we're taking their liquidity, we're providing a service and we're driving fees back to them as well. And we really like to have that thinking flow all the way through. Now, of course, people are going to build whatever they want to build on the hub. And there's going to be great reasons to build purely consumer facing things on the hub too, when you're at the crossroads of all of this liquidity and you have first class access to all of these different ecosystems and these builders. Like if you're thinking about where do you want to launch a perps aggregator or a lending market, the hub is probably a great place because you're going to be able to build super expressive applications with IBC that, you know, aggregate over protocols in Solana and Base and the Cosmos ecosystem. And that kind of thing isn't going to be possible elsewhere. So we think you're definitely going to see pure, you know, consumer products there too, but it's going to be because it's this incredible place for businesses to connect with one another.
Yeah, awesome. And I think that's a good transition to IBC itself. I know we're covering a few different topics, but it's cool to kind of pieces to like break this down in stages. I'm trying to kind of like follow a story along with this stuff. So let's talk, Adam, hub value accrual. So you've mentioned some of this, having a permissionless layer, having apps, having B2B smart contracts, as well as consumer-facing layers, but also like the idea of this. I don't like this model because that's kind of like what Axelar and some of these other use, but like the hub and spoke model, sort of like being the center of things around it. Talk to me about like, I guess, IBC and the future vision of Cosmos Hub being the center of IBC. Like how does this change the fabric of IBC as we know it? And hey, Jordan, it's good to see Jordan in the stream as well. How does this change the hub in general in terms of how it's currently operating versus IBC Eureka, IBC V2, and this wider change to the hub being a hub?
Yeah. Noam, you want to start that?
Sure. Well, first things first, right? IBC V2 is the protocol. Everyone has access to IBC V2. It's free. It's an open source thing you can put on any Cosmos chain. You can put it on any sort of non-Cosmos chain. Eureka itself is this product, right? The product that's specific to the hub. And so what that does is, like, if you think about it, the reason why IBC expansion has been challenging is because of this sort of heterogeneous environment of like many different tech stacks. Like building IBC for Solana is a very different thing than building IBC for Ethereum, than for Cosmos. And so for all these chains that want to connect to all these places, and they want to do this in like the most trust minimized way that's technically possible right now, it's going to be really challenging for them to make all these connections. So here's an example: the Ethereum bridge itself. We're working, we're doing like we're using ZK proofs off chain to make sure that everything's running a lot faster and much more affordably. So there's a bunch of infrastructure that you basically need to do in order to like have these bridges operate really effectively. So, and there's the last thing is also the fact that, we are finally getting to that stage now where there are too many chains for everyone to just peer-to-peer connect to each other, right? That's a huge problem if you have 1,000 chains and they all talk to each other. That's just too many connections. There's a reason why you have an internet service provider at home, because you don't want to drag a bunch of cables to every single person that you know and talk to them, right? So that's very straightforward in the Web2 world, but in blockchain, that hasn't really sort of materialized. So Eureka is a way for us to finally execute on that original vision, somewhat of a hub and spoke model, where we can finally, have a chain come in and say, hey, I want to have access to everything and a bunch of services. They just plug into the hub. Everything's available for them, and they can go on and hop onto any other sort of ecosystem, tap into that liquidity, tap into the user base. Yeah. Barry, maybe you want to add something to it. I'm not sure. But
yeah, I mean, I think you put it well in terms of why now, right? I think just, again, we have seen in the classic Cosmos ecosystem chains spending anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000 a month on relayers, connecting them everywhere, right? And we have seen relayers tell us repeatedly for years, hey, we don't have a great business model around this. There's not a great way for this to scale. And we see constant outages. We know better than anyone. Like Skip Go is responsible for about 75% of transactions that are cross-chain in Cosmos. And so when a relayer goes down, or when a chain goes down, we're the first to know, and often are the ones pinging people being like, hey, this is backed up, or do you know who relays this channel? And people are like, no, or I think it's this guy, or we had a delegation, it used to be this guy. And it's just this, it's silly, right? It's you wouldn't, if you work backwards from what do the users care about, you wouldn't do it this way. Like you would care about speed, reliability, and having as little infrastructure as you can possibly have, right? These are obvious things, like super obvious things. And that's exactly what we're working backwards from and saying, okay, the hub should be a hub. You connect to it over IBC. You don't have to connect anywhere else. You don't have to, and you and your users don't have to worry about, oh, am I going to have an excellent connection there? We can provide super high uptime, super low latency, super value aligned connections too, right? If you want to take fees on your IBC traffic, we can kick those back through the hub to you. Like it's not a zero sum thing. Again, it actually is purely a scaling thing and a service that we can provide chains, and chains are super excited for it. We're working with some really big names to actually use the hub as their hub. And from a user's perspective, again, none of this matters. Like, you are able to go to the Osmosis front end or to the Neutron front end, or Babylon when it launches, or all these different apps, and they're all using Skip Go to handle their routing. It's all one transaction. None of it matters that you're hopping through another chain or whatever. That's just like old, like dated, pre-skip cope from days gone by. So we think this is like better for chains, and it's better for users, and it's better for users, and it's better for chains partially because it's better for users. So it's not a trade-off thing. It's like, obviously this should have existed for years, and it's embarrassing that it didn't.
If you think about it also, we all do. But if you think about it also, you look into the future, like what are we really building towards? Like what is this future that we really want to enable? If you think about, your mom and dad, they're on Facebook, and they don't go and think about like, oh, I'm on the Facebook server that's running on Amazon, and I need to use my Amazon specific login thing, whatever. And that is how it is right now in crypto, right? You have to I need to have this wallet because it's a Cosmos thing, and now I have to think about moving my assets to this thing. I have to be aware of all this infrastructure. Like everyone that's doing crypto right now is a pro user, right? There's very little people who aren't, and if they are, they're generally just in one ecosystem, like they're on Tron or something, whatever. Like they're just doing their own thing there. And so we want to get to a future where bridging is just, everyone's forgotten about bridging because it just works.
I was saying, I feel it in my soul. I've probably smashed the skip chat a fair bit in the past. I remember with Squid as well. There were times where we'd have a launch coming up in Cosmos, and we had users from Ethereum going through Noble, right, and getting stuck or bridging, and then the relayers are stuck between Noble and Neutron or Osmosis, and just no I guess liveness, and we're just try to track all these transactions down to figure out if it's gone through Axelar or if it's gone through IBC, where it's stuck. And it was a nightmare to onboard users, because when you onboarded large numbers of users into the ecosystem, I remember it was just tracking down these transactions. Oh no, the relay that was paid to be a relay has not been relaying, and they're not tracking. And so I need to jump in the Cosmos BD chat and flush the channels and all this sort of stuff, right? And you're like, how does this scale? How does anyone build on top of this if you can't trust that the relay is going to work? How do you build a router or an aggregator or anything to do with cross-chain transactions if it can just get stuck? And you got teams that had to build their own relays and everything. So it's very interesting to see that was the mentality. Oh no, we're not going to charge fees. It's just this very much backwards approach. And so I'm curious to hear, from a monetization perspective, is the hub going to charge? Is there going to be fees for this? How is that going to change in terms of the relayers? Is that going to be funded by the hub, or is there a business model going forward for the IBC relayers?
Yeah, there are a couple answers to that. One is in IBC v2. One of the things that we're really focused on is delivering a simple but complete set of fee mechanisms. So we really want to incentivize a vibrant and independent developer ecosystem around IBC v2 so it can scale at the scale of crypto. That means teams need to be able to build light clients and profit off of that work directly. They need to be able to build other forms of security mechanisms, profit off that work directly. Relayers need to be able to profit off of sending packets around. And the Cosmos Hub itself needs to be able to profit off of governing the protocol, right? And governing the canonical contract of the protocol and doing this routing. So going forward with IBC v2, it's not there in this first launch that's coming up very, very soon. But the first launch is really a very small taste of where we're going with functionality. We really needed to get it out there because we've got a bunch of customers lined up for it already. And, if you know anything about the old Skip Chain team and the Interchain Labs team now, we don't do this crypto thing of we'll build for a year and maybe it'll be ready. And no, we build fast as we can. We ship the minimal thing that customers want to pay for, and that's what we're doing here. We're going to keep doing. So you're going to see a ton of releases from us, and you're going to see that protocol change a lot. So we're building out that comprehensive fee story. Then in terms of IBC Classic routes that route through the hub, we haven't answered all of those questions yet. What we're going to come to though is a design that is beneficial for the Cosmos Hub, that is beneficial for the folks that use the Cosmos Hub as a router, and that is low cost for end users and just makes sense, right? There's a bunch of ways that we can set that up, and users won't have to worry about it. They're not going to see exorbitant bridge fees, but it will be sustainable, right? And it'll be sustainable for the hub and for the teams that decide to use the hub as a router, right? And so we're excited to do it. It's on the list right now. We're footing the bill, right? Like that's what's happening right now. We're footing the bill. In some cases, the chains we're working with are footing the bill, like these kinds of things, and it needs to change, right? But it will.
Makes sense. Yeah. Speaking about IBC, actually, I'd love to hear more from your side. So obviously IBC V2 or Eureka is the government's proposal has passed to connect to Ethereum. So there's obviously now a roadmap for finally we're seeing the vision of IBC spread past the Cosmos. We're like, okay, this is actually becoming a thing. You know, for a long time, we've heard of teams building IBC or bridges to like Solana and Ethereum. Now that's finally becoming a thing. How does that look from a rollout perspective? So, you know, we're looking at Ethereum. I'm guessing L2s and Solana are probably next. From I guess like a specifics, my understanding of it is it's just token transfers for now. How does that look like from a rollout? So IBC V2 Eureka with token transfers to Ethereum, maybe L2 Solana, and then work on like message passing. So I guess RCAs, RCQs, things like that. How does that look like from a rollout perspective? And just to add like an end question to the end of it, it's like, this is one from the audience, so I thought I'd tag it on. Do you see any challenges to adoption, and how do you plan to handle those?
Yeah. So from a rollout perspective, we don't have everything staged yet. What we know is we need to expand to Base and Solana as fast as possible. We need to add native mint burn instead of just token transfer, which is lock and mint. And we need to have general contract call functionality for ICAs, ICQs, for turning the hub into a super differentiated platform. Those are the things that we know. How we're going to stage those things and which we're going to do first, we don't know yet. Really, I think what we have a lot of confidence in is the IBC protocol team sitting with us and sitting with the initial customers who we have lined up for the launch, who we're super excited about. We can't say who they are right now, but there are a bunch of exciting ones on both sides, right? The Ethereum side in terms of asset issuers that want access to Cosmos chains, and the Cosmos chain side that want access to Ethereum and want those assets on their chains. There's a bunch of exciting folks on both sides. So we are super confident that our sales process has bootstrapped a good initial set. And what we do know is we need to get all these other pieces in place to make the hub a really compelling place for people to build, right? Because that is the core thing we need. Why build on the hub if you can build the same thing somewhere else? If you can build the same thing on Solana just as easily, you're not going to pick the Cosmos Hub, realistically. You're going to pick the Cosmos Hub if you can do something that's not possible anywhere else. And getting to this point with IBC is going to be critical there. And what we have the power to do with IBC that's really hard for other teams to do, great protocol team. They're like the best. They're honestly like incredible. And it's been such a privilege to start to work with them. We're locking them in a room after they ship this first version. They're going to be speccing out like the full-fledged, like fully functional version of what's going to be able to expand everywhere. And then we're going to work with a ton of teams from all around crypto to help IBC expand. Because one thing we've seen is everybody wants this. Like, this isn't just like just a Cosmos thing. Like, everybody wants a new, credibly neutral standard for moving data and packets and tokens around. And they're super excited to work with us to do that. And we just need to give them the blueprint, and the protocol team can do that. And then we're going to expand super fast.
100%. For those that maybe aren't super, we have a lot of Cosmos people on this stream, but people that aren't aware of the difference between IBC and pretty much everything out there is the trustless nature of how IBC is set up. It's just such a superior solution. There's so many reasons why, but it's just such a superior solution in terms of security and so many different things as a bridge. And so I think if we're comparing it to what the rest of the industry uses, it's still, I mean, if you go to Ethereum EVM, you go to Solana, it's just the bridges, it's like fractured interop. Even if you're trying to bridge from Solana to Ethereum, it's just like it's a nightmare for anyone who's experienced it in so many ways. It's a challenge. So just really curious on that point. You mentioned Mint and a burn and Mint. How is that going to change IBC in general between lock and from the regular mechanism of IBC? Does that change the properties of IBC, or is it quite similar to its current design, or does it introduce new elements?
Yeah. So what the way IBC works now is, well, backing up, what makes IBC special, right? Why does anyone actually care about us doing this, and why should developers care in terms of building on the hub? There's really two basic things. One is IBC has deep support for light client security. What that means is it is legitimately trust minimized. Now, we can make that much more flexible, but if you compare that to Hyperlane or Layer 0 or Axelar, they don't have that, right? So like when you're connecting between two chains over IBC, there's no one in the middle who you're trusting. There's no other thing. What we're doing is we're having one validator set communicate directly with the other validator set. So the trust is, can I trust this validator set? Which if you're going to that chain anyways, you have to, right? So it's the root of trust. And that's super rare. That really doesn't exist elsewhere in any meaningful way now. And the second thing is it's super expressive. So IBC, most interop protocols, they're like TCP IP, where you just send a packet. You just send a packet into the void, and that's basically it. And that makes it really hard to build things that have complex control flows, right? That can take meaningful conditional actions based on other things. And we've personally experienced this ourselves. You know, with Skip Go, we collect fees on 100 different Cosmos chains when folks are swapping, and we need to get those to USDC and Atom and Bitcoin. And how do we do that at scale in a way that's automated? We can do it with IBC super easily. We can totally automate all of those crazy cross-chain swaps and transfers, thousands of them, right? As soon as we try to bring that into Ethereum, can't do it, because Axelar doesn't have the context that we need to say, oh, hey, something went wrong. What do I do now? Or I finished that first step. What do I do now? And so that expressivity is going to allow IBC to be much more useful in building actual cross-chain applications. So it's in both ways, it's like a huge step function forward. You get real, like, interesting cross-chain applications, and you can do them in ways that have better trust properties than you can right now, even if you did have the expressiveness from these other bridges. So as a result of both those things, people are really, really excited to see IBC expand, because it's a total game changer. And it's taken so long because the original version of IBC was super complex. The IBC protocol team, I can't take credit for their work, has figured out ways to strip 95% of that complexity out and keep those really important properties. So that's what makes IBC v2 special, and I think is going to lead to a total change in how interop happens everywhere. It's really gonna revolutionize it.
That's awesome. I want to touch on maybe one just last thing. I know we're coming up to sort of the hour. I want to touch on EVMOS. So the EVM, that was one of the recent announcements. Maybe paint the picture, maybe a helicopter view of that, what that looks like, what that means moving forward. Was a big thing. For those that don't know, Evmos was a kind of a pioneer of EVM on Cosmos, and had its own challenges and things like that. And there was a recent announcement made by the ICL. So maybe if you want to walk me through that and what that means for the hub.
Yeah, Noam led that project, so
I'll try. So first off, separate two things: FMOS, EVMOS. FMOS is a chain. We have nothing to do with this chain, but that is the team that built EVMOS. And EVMOS is on FMOS. Yeah, the naming is somebody once made. Okay, so but there's a separation, and so we have nothing to do with the chain, but we were very interested in getting EVMOS. So that's a module that you plug into your Cosmos chain, and then poof, you have EVM support basically. We wanted to have this freely accessible for everyone. FMOS, or the team behind EVMOS, had licensed it, which is totally understandable given their perspective and where they were coming from. But our sort of like most requested feature from all the app chains out there was like, can we have an EVM? Because they are trying to close deals with large businesses that are operating mostly in the EVM world. And it was very hard for them to close these deals when they didn't have a functioning EVM. So we got into a conversation, and we were very interested in trying to understand, like, how can we get this open sourced? The ICL ended up funding Tharsis, who was behind EVMOS, we managed to open source it. It's now available. We call it Cosmos EVM. And we're going to be working on this for the next few months. We're going to be like putting some finishing touches on it and getting it through an audit so we can actually cut the release call for V1, version 1. And then for the rest of the year, we're going to be in touch with a lot of the customers to try and understand what they really need. We have some ideas, obviously. One thing that I'm really, really excited about, that's something we've already managed to do in a POC. We're going to be able to bring MetaMask support to pretty much, or like any sort of EVM wallet support to pretty much like all Cosmos chains that are interested in it. This is definitely something that's very important to us, and I think it's going to make a huge change for every Cosmos chain, because basically now over Eureka you can come in to any Cosmos chain. For you as an EVM user or an Ethereum user, nothing will change. You can just walk in there, you get your MetaMask wallet, you see your balance, everything is visible. So that's a really sweet experience that we think is going to change a lot.
I think that'll be huge, because Snaps just wasn't a very good solution. I think we experienced this a lot because we onboarded a lot of users into the ecosystem, and it was just the wallet thing was one of the biggest blockers, I think, for anyone coming in.
I mean, it's tough because it's like, on one hand, I think Kepler is a much better wallet than 90% of like the other shit that I've tried. I mean, Kepler, it's smooth, it's fast, it works. It works for 100 different chains. They're making it better all the time. The mobile wallet also works really well if you haven't tried it yet. At the same time, MetaMask has 10x, 100x the distribution right now, 1000x. I mean, it's orders of magnitude different. And if you are building a business, you don't want to have these kinds of artificial constraints on your distribution. So we obviously need this. And Noam and the team have done just incredible work making it happen super, super fast. Like, not just taking this open source code base, but actually saying, okay, what were the UX problems there? And they're already starting to fix them. And like, it's not going to be like EVM like it was in Cosmos 2-3 years ago. It's going to be clean. It's going to be smooth. It's going to just work. And nobody's going to have any idea if you're a Cosmos chain or you're an EVM chain. Like, it's going to be really nice. So what that means.
How do we get around token approvals? Is that still a thing on EVM, or is it also a way of abstracting?
Well, actually, I don't know. We might be able to do something about it. I doubt it.
I think we might not want to, but there's we can look into it. But we might not want to for lots of different reasons. Also, I just want to shout out.
Probably at the app level. It's probably at app level.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something to think about. We have a few other more important priorities right now, but that's definitely something to look into. Also, just huge shout out to Vlad, who just joined chat, who's part of the team and has done a lot of the engineering work on that side. We couldn't have gotten this over the finish line that quickly without him. So just want to mention that.
Chads. I think we're sort of out of time. I want to thank you guys so much for taking the time to jump on this Spaces. Well, it's not really a space; it's like a stream. I've been loving the bull posting as well on Twitter, getting the whole entire team bull posting. I think it's a cool playbook thing to have the whole team.
I will just say this was not a playbook. This was not planned. One of the engineers made a Twitter account and then tweeted, "I love Cosmos," and the community naturally adopted it, and now we are amplifying it, but we had no master plan. He just did that one day. So we can't take
That's not true. Barry tells us every day, it's like, it's in our contract. We have to wake up, and then he says, we have to say, "I love Cosmos." It's like, it's actually quite not. I'm kidding.
I've talked about this before with the team.
It is
requiring the
organic.
whole team to have a presence. Requiring the whole team to have a presence to actually post on Twitter and actually even if it's one thing a day or one thing a week, I'm like, it's good to have the whole presence of the whole entire team. So it's good.
But it's nice that it's organic.
Yeah,
and it's nice that everyone's just having a good time.
The actual truth is, I wish I, could control people well enough to be like, you must post
exactly
every day. But in practice, I don't, and people are just excited enough that they want to do that. And so I'm glad. I prefer that we live in this world. I wish I had more control, but is what it is.
I love it, guys. Guys, thank you so much for your time. We're going to have this, obviously the recordings will be up on YouTube and on Twitter for those that want to re-watch this. We'll be able to chop it up as well to usable snippets as well. So it's a lot of cool content here. But guys, I'm really looking forward to everything coming out. I know you guys have a couple more Red Bulls to smash and more work to be done.
Yes.
So I'll leave you guys to it, but love it, guys. And I look forward to all the progress.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Chat soon.